In the quiet African village of Luanda, where the air smelled of wet soil and mango trees, the sound of drums filled the evening sky. It was a sound of joy and celebration, for Amina had just given birth to her first child. The women of the village danced outside her small hut, clapping and singing songs of blessing. Their voices rose and fell like waves, echoing across the nearby fields. Everyone in Luanda knew that a new baby was not just a child. It was a gift from the spirits, a promise of life continuing. Inside the hut, Amina lay on a mat woven from palm leaves. Her face was tired, but her eyes glowed with happiness as she looked at the tiny bundle in her arms. The baby was small, soft and warm, wrapped in a thin piece of cloth. Amina smiled and whispered, "You are my morning light, Adissa." The baby stirred slightly, her little fingers curling around the air as if she could already feel her mother's love. Tund, Amina's husband, stood nearby, his heart full of pride. He was a tall man with kind eyes and rough hands from working long hours in the fields. When he looked at his daughter, his eyes softened. He knelt beside Amina and said, "She is perfect, my love. The ancestors have blessed us." He gently touched the baby's forehead, careful not to wake her. Amina smiled at him, and for a moment, everything in their world felt peaceful. Outside, the voices grew louder. The village elder, Baba Deka, came to bless the newborn. He was an old man with a white beard and a walking stick carved from ebony wood. When he entered the hut, everyone fell silent out of respect. He looked at the baby and nodded slowly. "Adissa," he said in a deep voice, "the one who brings clarity. She will grow strong like the river that cuts through the forest." He sprinkled a few drops of scented oil on her forehead, murmuring a short prayer. After the elder's blessing, neighbors began to arrive with small gifts. Some brought baskets of fruit, others brought handmade baby cloths. The women hugged Amina and laughed. "She looks like you," one said. Another added, "No, she has Tund's eyes." Amina only smiled and held Adissa closer, enjoying the warmth and kindness around her. As the sun began to set, the sky turned orange and gold. Children ran around the hut, chasing each other and pretending to be drummers. Smoke rose from cooking fires, carrying the smell of roasted maize and fresh soup. The whole village seemed alive with happiness. It was rare to see such peace and unity, and everyone felt grateful. But as the night deepened, Amina began to notice something else. People she did not know started coming to the hut. Some were villagers from far parts of Luanda, others were strangers passing through. They all wanted to see the newborn. Some wanted to touch her tiny hands, others asked to hold her, just for a moment. Amina felt uneasy but did not want to appear rude. In her culture, it was important to be respectful to visitors, especially those who came to bless a child. She looked at Tund, who smiled and said softly, "It's all right, my wife. They mean well." So she nodded, and one by one, the visitors looked at Adissa, some whispering words of blessing, others smiling quietly. Still, Amina felt a strange chill in her chest that she could not explain. Late into the night, when most of the visitors had gone, Amina rocked Adissa in her arms. The moonlight slipped through the gaps in the hut's wall, shining faintly on the baby's face. Amina traced a finger over her daughter's cheek and whispered, "You are safe, my little one." The baby made a soft sound, half a sigh, half a hum. Tund entered with a small clay lamp and placed it beside them. The light flickered gently. "The whole village is talking about her," he said proudly. "They say her cry sounds like music." He laughed quietly. "I told them she gets that from her mother." Amina chuckled, though her mind was still heavy with thought. "Tund," she said softly, "do you think too many people came today? I felt strange when that woman with the green scarf touched Adissa's hand." Tund looked at her curiously. "Strange how?" "I don't know," Amina replied. "It was like the air turned cold for a moment. Maybe I'm just tired." He brushed her shoulder gently. "You have nothing to fear. She is loved. The spirits are watching over her." Amina nodded but said nothing. She leaned back against the wall and watched the lamp's light dance on the floor. Outside, crickets sang and a soft wind moved through the trees. It was peaceful again, yet her mother's heart would not rest. The next morning, the village woke early. Roosters crowed, and smoke from cooking fires rose into the gray sky. Amina stepped outside with Adissa in her arms. The baby's eyes were open, dark and shining, and she looked around as if already curious about the world. Neighbors greeted them warmly, calling out, "Good morning, mother of Adissa," and "May the child grow with strength." Amina smiled politely, but inside she felt something she could not name. It was as if an unseen pair of eyes still watched from somewhere beyond the huts. She told herself she was just being overprotective. After all, every mother felt that way when her first child was born. Throughout the day, Amina noticed that people kept coming. Men, women, even small children, each one wanting to see or touch the baby. Some pressed coins into her hand for good luck, others offered bracelets made of beads. One young woman placed a hand on Adissa's head and whispered a blessing. But as soon as she did, the baby began to cry sharply, louder than before. Amina's heart jumped. She held Adissa close, whispering, "Shoo, my little light, it's all right." But the baby would not stop crying until they were back inside the hut. Amina looked around nervously, her eyes darting toward the doorway. For a brief moment she thought she saw a shadow move outside, though there was no wind. That night Amina could not sleep. She sat near the fire, humming softly to her baby. Tund was already asleep, exhausted from entertaining guests all day. The flames cracked and hissed, and Amina stared into them, lost in thought. She remembered what her grandmother used to say, "When a child is born, the spirits of both light and shadow come to see who has arrived." She looked down at Adissa, who was now sleeping peacefully, her small chest rising and falling. Amina touched her gently and whispered, "No shadow will touch you, my daughter. Not while I breathe." Outside, the village was quiet, and the stars stretched across the night sky like silver dust. Somewhere in the distance an owl hooted. The world seemed calm again, but Amina's heart told her that something unseen had begun to stir, something that would soon test the strength of a mother's love. And as she held Adissa close, she knew one thing for certain. Not every hand that reached out to bless a child carried peace. Some, though smiling, might carry something far more dangerous, something that could not be seen, only felt. 3 days passed since little Adissa's birth, and the village of Luanda was still full of joy. Every morning people came by to bring gifts, baskets of fruit, handmade blankets, or small charms to protect the baby. Amina's hut was filled with laughter and warmth. Adissa slept most of the time, her soft breathing a comfort to her mother's heart. Everything seemed peaceful. But peace in a village can change quickly, sometimes with just one visitor. That afternoon, as the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the fields, a figure appeared on the narrow path leading to Amina's hut. It was an old woman named Mama Zuri. She walked slowly, leaning on a wooden stick, her back bent and her face covered with a faded scarf. People in the village knew her, but few ever visited her home. She lived alone at the edge of Luanda, near the forest, where she gathered herbs and roots for medicine. Some said she was wise. Others whispered that she had strange ways and spoke to spirits that no one else could see. When Amina saw her coming, her heart skipped a beat. Mama Zuri had not come during the celebration or sent any word. Still, it was the custom to welcome every guest, especially the elderly. So Amina greeted her with respect. "Mama Zuri, you are welcome. Please come inside." Mama Zuri nodded slowly, her eyes small and sharp. "I heard a child has been born," she said in a voice like dry leaves. "I came to bless her." Tund, who was outside fixing a basket, looked up. He wiped his hands and stepped forward. "It is kind of you to come, Mama. Our daughter is resting now." The old woman's lips curved into a faint smile. "Ah, babies sleep often, but blessings do not wait." Her words made Amina uneasy, but she said nothing. She led Mama Zuri inside, where Adissa lay sleeping in a cloth cradle beside the bed. The soft smell of herbs filled the small hut, and the only sound was the gentle crackling of a small fire. Mama Zuri stepped closer. Her movements were slow but deliberate. "She is beautiful," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Let me hold the baby for just a moment." Amina hesitated. She felt a strange tightness in her chest, a quiet warning deep in her heart. But before she could speak, Tund said, "Of course, Mama. You have come a long way." He smiled politely, though his tone carried more manners than warmth. Mama Zuri reached out her hands. Her fingers were long and thin, the skin dry and wrinkled. She lifted Adissa carefully, almost too gently. For a moment she just stared at the baby, her lips moving silently. Amina noticed her eyes, dark and distant, as if they were seeing something beyond the room. The baby stirred and made a small sound, not quite a cry but uneasy. Mama Zuri leaned closer and whispered something under her breath, words too soft to understand. Then she smiled faintly, her mouth trembling. Amina's skin prickled. "Mama, what are you saying?" she asked quietly. The old woman looked up, her eyes sharp again. "Just a blessing," she said. "Nothing more." She kissed the baby's forehead and handed her back. Then, without another word, she turned and walked out of the hut, her stick tapping the ground as she went. Amina stood still for a long moment, holding her baby tightly. Something about the air felt different, heavier, colder. Tun tried to brush it off with a laugh. You see? She only came to give her blessing. You worry too much. Amina didn't reply. She looked down at Adissa, who was now awake and staring up with wide, uncertain eyes. The baby's lips trembled and she gave a small whimper. Amina kissed her gently. It's all right, my light, she whispered. Mama's here. That night, as the moon rose high above the palm trees, the wind began to blow softly through the village. Most people had gone to sleep. Inside Amina's hut, the fire burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. Amina lay beside Tund, with Adissa sleeping between them. For a while the night was peaceful. Then just after midnight the baby began to cry. At first, Amina thought it was hunger. She picked her up, humming softly, but the crying did not stop. It grew louder, sharp, frightened, desperate. Tund woke and sat up. Maybe she needs to be fed, he said. I tried, Amina whispered, panic rising in her voice. She won't stop. The baby's body began to tremble slightly, her tiny fists clenching. It was as if she was cold, but the room was warm. Amina wrapped her tighter, held her close to her chest, but nothing helped. The crying echoed through the hut, cutting through the night like a warning. Tund stood and lit another lamp. Maybe she has a fever. He touched Adissa's forehead. No, she's not hot. Amina rocked the baby, whispering prayers she had learned from her mother. Sleep, my child, sleep. No harm shall come near you. But Adissa's cries only grew weaker, as if something unseen was pulling the strength out of her. Outside, a dog began to bark, a low, uneasy sound. The wind pushed against the walls of the hut, making them creak. Amina looked toward the door and felt her stomach twist. In the flicker of the lamp, she thought she saw something move, a shadow, tall and thin, passing by the window. She blinked and it was gone. Tund, she whispered, her voice trembling. Did you see that? He shook his head. It's only the wind, Amina. You need rest. But Amina could not rest. She stayed awake the rest of the night, rocking her child and humming softly. The baby's crying finally stopped before dawn, but her breathing was shallow, her body limp with exhaustion. Amina's eyes filled with tears. Please, little one, be strong, she whispered. When the morning light came, the village woke to another bright day. Children laughed outside and the smell of cooking fires filled the air. To everyone else it was just another morning, but for Amina, it was a morning filled with fear. She sat near the door, Adissa still in her arms. The baby slept now, but her skin felt cooler than before. Tund tried to comfort her. She will be fine. All babies cry. Maybe it's nothing. But Amina could not shake the memory of Mama Zuri's visit. The whispering, the strange look in her eyes, the way the air had changed in the hut. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the soft murmur again, the words she could not understand. By evening, Adissa cried again, weaker this time. The sound pierced Amina's heart. She knew then that this was no ordinary sickness. Something had been brought into their home that day, something that could not be cured by herbs or milk. As the sun set behind the hills, she looked at Tund and said quietly, Tomorrow we will go to Baba Kato. You will know what to do. I will not let my baby suffer. Tund nodded, though he still didn't believe. But Amina's voice carried a strength he could not argue with. She looked down at her daughter, her eyes full of tears, and whispered, No shadow will touch you again, Adissa. Not while I live. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it a faint sound, like laughter, soft and distant. And somewhere beyond the edge of the village, Mama Zuri's stick tapped slowly against the ground as she walked, her figure fading into the night. The morning sun rose slowly over Luanda, painting the village in soft gold. Birds sang from the trees, and the smell of fresh cooking fires filled the air. But inside Amina's small hut, there was no peace, no laughter, only fear. Amina sat on the floor holding her baby close. Adissa's eyes were half open but dull. Her tiny lips trembled, and when Amina tried to feed her, she turned her head away weakly. The baby who once cried loudly now made only soft, broken sounds. Her skin, once warm and pink, looked pale and tired. Tund, Amina said, her voice shaking. She will not feed. She doesn't even open her eyes. Tund knelt beside her and touched the baby's forehead. She feels cold, he said softly. But there's no fever. Amina's hands trembled as she pulled the blanket tighter around her child. Something is wrong, she whispered. I can feel it in my heart. They both sat in silence for a moment, listening to the small sounds of the morning, the chickens outside, the distant laughter of children, the wind moving through the trees. Everything sounded normal, but their world had changed. Tund stood up suddenly. "We must call Baba Cato," he said. "He will know what to do." Amina nodded. Baba Cato was the village healer, a man who had seen many things. He was old and wise, with skin dark and wrinkled like tree bark, and eyes that seemed to see beyond the living world. People said he spoke with the ancestors when the living could not understand their signs. Tund ran quickly through the village calling for help. The neighbors looked up from their work as he passed. "It's the baby," he told them. "Please send Baba Cato to us." By the time he returned, Baba Cato was walking beside him, leaning on a carved stick. He carried a small leather bag full of herbs, beads, and dried leaves. When he entered the hut, he bowed slightly to Amina. "Peace be upon your home," he said in a deep, calm voice. Amina's eyes were wet with tears. "Please Baba, help my child. She will not eat and her body feels strange. Last night she cried and now she is so weak." Baba Cato nodded slowly and knelt beside her. He looked at Adissa for a long time, saying nothing. Then, with gentle hands, he placed his palm over the baby's chest. He closed his eyes. The hut fell silent except for the faint crackle of the fire. After a few moments, he opened his eyes and looked at the parents. "A spirit has brushed against this child," he said quietly. "Not all hands carry peace." Amina gasped. "A spirit? What does that mean?" The old man sighed deeply. "Sometimes when a child is newly born, their spirit is still soft, like a leaf that has just opened. If someone with heavy energy touches them, the spirit may bend or hide. That is what I feel here. The child's spirit has been touched." Tun's face turned pale. "But who would harm a baby?" Baba Cato's eyes grew thoughtful. "Harm does not always come from hatred. Sometimes it comes from jealousy or sadness or even curiosity. Tell me, who has held this child?" Amina looked down, her throat tightening. "Many people came to see her," she said softly. "But 3 days ago Mama Zuri came. She asked to hold the baby. I did not want to refuse." The old man's expression changed slightly. "Mama Zuri," he repeated. "Ah, she walks between two worlds. Some call her wise, but others say her shadow is heavy." Amina felt her heart beat faster. "She whispered something I could not hear," she said. Then she left. "That night, my baby began to cry without stopping." Baba Cato nodded slowly. "The child's spirit was touched that day. But do not fear. The ancestors watch over those who believe. We will call her spirit back to the light." He opened his leather bag and began to take out herbs, green leaves, small stones, and pieces of dried bark. The smell filled the hut, sharp but comforting. He crushed some leaves in a clay bowl, mixing them with water. Then he placed his hand over the bowl and whispered a prayer. "The spirit of this child must be reminded of warmth," he said. "We must call it home." Amina watched as he dipped his fingers in the mixture and gently rubbed a bit on Adissa's forehead, chest, and tiny feet. The baby did not cry, but her body twitched slightly, as if something invisible moved inside her. "Do not be afraid," Baba Cato said softly. "The body feels what the spirit feels." He reached for a small gourd filled with sacred smoke. Lighting it, he waved it around the baby, letting the smoke rise and circle above her. He began to chant in an old language, the rhythm slow and deep. Tun stood beside him, his heart pounding. He did not understand the words, but the sound filled the air with a strange peace. Even the wind outside seemed to stop moving. Baba Cato finally spoke in a low voice, "Ancestors of light, protect this child. Let no shadow rest upon her. Return her peace, return her breath." The flame in the lamp flickered as he spoke. For a moment, Amina thought she saw something, like a faint shimmer of air above the baby's body. Then it was gone. Baba Cato's voice grew softer. "She will need rest. Her spirit is tired, but it is not lost. Keep her close. Do not let anyone new come near her until she smiles again." Amina nodded quickly. Tears filled her eyes again, but this time they were mixed with hope. "Thank you, Baba. May the ancestors bless you." He smiled faintly. "A newborn spirit is still fresh," he said, "and must be protected. Remember that, Amina. The first 40 days are sacred. Keep her safe. Keep her warm. And when the moon grows full, bring her to the river. There we will finish the cleansing." After he left, the hut was quiet again. Amina held Adissa against her chest, feeling the small rise and fall of her breathing. Tun sat beside her, watching the fire. "Do you think she will get better?" he asked softly. "She must," Amina said. "I will not let her fade." That night the air felt different, still heavy but calm. Amina stayed awake, humming softly, never letting go of her daughter. Each time Adissa stirred, Amina whispered her name, reminding her that she was loved, that she was safe. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of distant drums. The villagers were celebrating something, maybe a harvest or a wedding. But inside the hut, there was only the rhythm of a mother's heartbeat and a baby's slow, fragile breath. Hours passed. Then just before dawn, Adissa made a soft sound, half a sigh, half a whimper. Her small hand moved slightly, curling around Amina's finger. Amina gasped and looked down. "She's moving," she whispered. "Tund, look." Tund turned quickly, his face lighting with relief. "She's stronger." Amina smiled through her tears, pressing her lips to her daughter's forehead. "The ancestors have heard us," she said. But deep inside she also knew this was not the end. The spirit that had touched her child was still out there, somewhere. And as the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Amina made a silent promise. No one, not even the kindest visitor, would ever touch her baby again without her blessing. The morning sun was still low when Amina woke to the sound of the village rooster. The sky glowed softly, painted with the first colors of dawn. She looked at Adissa sleeping beside her and felt both fear and hope. The baby was breathing better, her face calm, but her skin was still pale. Amina ran her fingers over her daughter's tiny hand and whispered, "Today, we will make you strong again." Tund was already awake, preparing for the journey. He wrapped a small cloth around Adissa and checked the small basket that held water, herbs, and a calabash. Baba Cato had told them to come to the river at sunrise for the cleansing. "The river is the mother of all life," he had said. "It washes away what the eye cannot see." When they stepped outside, the air was cool and fresh. Mist floated over the grass, and the earth smelled damp from the night's dew. Birds were singing softly, greeting the new day. The village was still quiet, the fires not yet lit, and most people still asleep. It was a peaceful hour, an hour for healing. Baba Cato waited for them near the edge of the village, his walking stick in hand. His robe was simple, brown and worn, but around his neck hung a string of beads that glowed faintly in the light. When he saw Amina and Tund, he nodded slowly. "You have come early. That is good. The river is strongest when the day is new." Amina bowed her head respectfully. "We are ready, Baba." "Good," he said. "The ancestors will hear us." They began walking together through the narrow path that led to the river. The journey was quiet except for the sounds of the morning, the crunch of dry leaves beneath their feet and the hum of insects in the air. Amina carried Adissa close to her chest, her heart beating fast with every step. She kept thinking of the last few nights, the crying, the weakness, the way the air had turned cold when Mama Zuri left. She wanted all of it gone. She wanted her baby's laughter back. After some time they reached the river. It flowed wide and calm, reflecting the pale orange of the sky. The sound of the water was gentle, like a lullaby. A few birds flew low over the surface, and the mist curled around the rocks. Baba Cato stopped near a large tree that leaned over the riverbank. Its roots twisted deep into the soil, and its branches stretched far above them, offering shade. "This is where we will call back her light," he said. Amina knelt down, placing Adissa on a soft cloth near the water. The baby stirred but did not cry. Her eyes fluttered open for a moment, gazing at the shining water. Baba Cato reached into his leather bag and took out 3 small things: a handful of herbs, a small stone, and a gourd filled with river water he had gathered at dawn. He placed them carefully in front of him, then looked at the couple. "You must be calm," he said. "The child feels what the mother feels." Amina nodded, taking a deep breath. Tund stood beside her, his hands clasped tightly together. The old man began to hum a low tune, his voice deep and slow, like the movement of the river. He sprinkled some of the herbs into the water, which made a faint hiss. Then he dipped his hand into the river and sprinkled droplets over Adissa's tiny body. As he did, he spoke softly. "River of life," he said, "wash away every shadow. Let the child be whole again." Amina watched closely, her heart pounding. The wind shifted slightly, brushing against her face. It was cool and soft, smelling of wet earth and leaves. Baba Cato continued, his eyes closed now. "Spirits of the river, ancestors of light, this child belongs to the world of the living. Return her laughter, return her strength. No darkness may follow her." He took the small stone and placed it near Adissa's feet. "The stone remembers," he said. "It will hold the memory of this day. The spirits will not forget." The river seemed to respond. The water rippled though there was no wind, and a thin mist began to rise. Amina's eyes filled with tears as she looked at her baby. For the first time in days, Adissa looked peaceful. Her chest rose and fell in an easy rhythm, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. Baba Cato smiled gently. She is listening. Her spirit is coming home. He lifted his hands toward the sky and said one last prayer. May she grow strong like the roots of this tree, and may no shadow ever touch her again. A strong breeze blew suddenly across the river, carrying with it the smell of rain though the sky was clear. Amina felt it brush against her skin, and she knew something had changed. The baby stirred again, then opened her eyes fully, looking straight at her mother. A soft coo escaped her lips, small but full of life. Amina gasped and laughed through her tears. Tund, she is looking at me. Look. Tund knelt beside them, his eyes wide with joy. Adissa, he whispered, touching her tiny hand. You are back, little one. The old healer's voice broke the moment of silence. The river has done its work. The spirit is clean. Now you must keep her close to you. For 7 days no one else must touch her. She is still tender, still new. Amina nodded quickly. I will protect her. Baba Cato took some of the water from the gourd and poured it gently on the ground beside them. To thank the river, he said. And to remind us that what gives life also takes it, if not respected. They stayed by the riverside for a while longer, letting the sun warm their faces. Adissa was now awake, making small, content sounds. The birds sang louder, and the water sparkled brighter, as if the world itself was celebrating her return. As they prepared to leave, Amina turned to the old man. Baba, how can I ever thank you? He smiled faintly, leaning on his stick. Do not thank me. Thank the river and thank the ancestors. And remember what you have seen today, purity is a gift, Amina. It must be guarded with care. On their way back to the village, people began to notice the change. Look, one woman whispered as they passed. The baby is smiling again. The healer has done it, said another. The child is whole. Amina only smiled, clutching Adissa close. The weight in her heart had lifted. The dark fear that had shadowed their home was gone. When they reached their hut, Baba Cato turned to face the small crowd that had gathered outside. His voice was calm but carried through the morning air. A child's purity is a gift, he said, and it must be protected. Do not let envy or careless touch steal it away. When a child is born, guard them with light. Let only hands of love hold them. The people nodded, murmuring in agreement. Some looked ashamed, remembering how quickly they had rushed to touch the newborn days before. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Amina sat by the doorway, rocking Adissa gently. The baby's eyes were bright, reflecting the orange glow of sunset. Tund sat beside them, smiling quietly. For the first time in many days their home felt warm again. The wind carried the sound of the river through the trees, a soft, steady whisper. Amina listened and smiled, knowing the spirits had heard their prayers. She kissed her daughter's forehead and said softly, You are my morning light once again. And far away, where the river curved around the forest, the water shimmered as if smiling back. Years passed and time moved gently over the village of Luanda. The river still sang the same soft song each morning, the trees still whispered when the wind passed through, and the people still gathered under the great baobab tree to share stories. Life continued, steady and full of color. And in that peaceful rhythm of life, little Adissa grew. She was no longer the weak newborn who had cried endlessly in the night. She had become a lively girl with bright eyes and a smile that warmed every heart. Her laughter could be heard running through the paths of the village, chasing butterflies or playing by the same river that had once healed her. Her mother, Amina, would often stop her work just to watch her daughter dance in the sun, her feet kicking up small clouds of dust as she sang. Tund, her father, was proud of her. You are as strong as the morning, he would tell her, lifting her into his arms. Adissa would giggle and touch his face, saying, And you are my mountain, Papa. Their home was filled with peace again, and the shadow that had once touched their hearts was only a memory. But even though the years brought calm, Amina never forgot what had happened when Adissa was a baby. She remembered the endless crying, the sudden weakness, and the fear that had filled her heart. She remembered Baba Cato's words by the river, Not all hands carry peace. Those words lived deep inside her, like a lesson carved into her soul. Whenever a new baby was born in the village, Amina was always one of the first to visit. She would come carrying small gifts, soft cloths, milk, or a bundle of herbs for the mother, and she would smile warmly. But before she left, she always said the same words, Be kind, but be careful. Not every hand brings blessing. At first, some of the young mothers did not understand. They would laugh softly and say, But everyone loves babies, Amina. And Amina would smile gently and answer, Yes, everyone loves them. But love is not always clean. Some hearts carry envy and some eyes carry shadow. A newborn is still new to the world. Their spirit is soft. You must protect it. Her words spread through the village like quiet rain soaking into the ground. People began to change how they behaved. When a baby was born, they no longer rushed to touch or hold it. Instead, they brought blessings from afar, soft songs, prayers, and smiles from a respectful distance. They learned that love could be shown in many ways, not just through touch. Adissa grew up hearing these lessons. She often sat beside her mother as Amina spoke to the other women. Sometimes she would ask, "Mama, why do you always say that not every hand brings blessing?" Amina would pause and touch her daughter's hair gently. "Because once, when you were a baby, a hand touched you that should not have. You became sick. The river saved you, but I learned that day how fragile a child's first days are. I promised that no mother in this village would suffer the fear I felt." Adissa would listen carefully, her young eyes full of curiosity. "So the river helped me?" she would ask. "Yes," Amina would say softly. "The river and the prayers of our ancestors. They reminded us that life is a gift we must guard." As Adissa grew older, she began to understand more deeply. She would follow her mother to every birth celebration and watch as Amina spoke kindly to each new mother. The villagers began to call Amina the mother of wisdom, for her words carried peace and strength. One afternoon, when Adissa was about 10 years old, a neighbor named Sefu came running to their home. His wife had just given birth, and he asked Amina to come bless the baby. Amina gathered a small gourd of clean water and motioned for Adissa to follow her. When they arrived, the little hut was warm and quiet. The mother lay resting, her newborn wrapped in a soft cloth beside her. Amina smiled as she entered and sprinkled a few drops of water on the ground, a sign of peace. Then she said softly, "The river flows with you, little one." She turned to the mother and said, "Remember, keep your child close for 7 days. Only your hands and your husband's hands should touch him. The world is full of love, but the spirit of a baby must learn to breathe before it meets too many hearts." The mother nodded gratefully. Adissa watched closely, understanding now that these small moments were more than words. They were blessings born from wisdom. As the years continued, the people of Luanda became known for their care with newborns. Travelers who passed through the village often noticed how calm and healthy the babies were. "What is your secret?" they would ask. And the elders would smile and reply, "A baby's first breath must be guarded by gentle hearts." It became a saying in Luanda, passed from one generation to another. It was whispered by grandmothers, sung by mothers, and taught to young girls. The story of what had happened to Adissa became part of the village's quiet teachings, not told in fear but in gratitude. It reminded them that even the smallest life deserved the greatest care. Adissa grew into a beautiful young woman. Her laughter still filled the air, and her spirit was full of kindness. She learned healing from Baba Cato before he grew old and passed his wisdom on to her. She spent her days helping others, tending to the sick, blessing newborns, and teaching the same gentle lessons her mother had once taught. Sometimes, when the moon was bright and the night was calm, Adissa would sit by the river, the same river that had once washed away her pain. She would listen to its flowing water and whisper, "Thank you." The river's soft sound always seemed to answer, as if it remembered her too. One evening she sat there with her mother. The sky was painted in shades of gold and purple, and the water shimmered like glass. Amina looked at her daughter and said, "You have become what the river wished for, a heart that heals." Adissa smiled. "You taught me, Mama. You taught everyone. Now the children of Luanda will always be safe." Amina looked out over the water, her eyes filled with peace. "That is all I ever wanted," she said quietly. The wind carried the scent of rain again, just as it had on that morning years ago when Baba Cato cleansed Adissa by the river. The village bells rang softly in the distance, marking the end of another day. As they sat there, Adissa rested her head on her mother's shoulder and whispered, "When I have my own child, I will tell them this story too." Amina smiled, her heart full. "Yes," she said, "because every generation must remember. Love is strong, but wisdom keeps it safe." And so, in Luanda, life continued with that lesson at its heart. Babies were born, laughter returned, and every new cry that echoed through the village carried with it the memory of one family's journey, from fear to faith, from darkness to light. The story of Adissa and the river became more than just a tale. It became a truth the people lived by. They learned that some dangers come not from malice, but from carelessness, and that love must always walk hand in hand with wisdom. And even as time passed, the mothers of Luanda would still remind one another in soft voices, "Be kind, but be careful. Not every hand brings blessing." They would smile at their sleeping babies, touch their tiny faces gently, and whisper, A baby's first breath must be guarded by gentle hearts.